From LPM,
Louisville Public Media.
Welcome to Where Y'all Really From, a podcast about Asian Americans in Kentucky. I'm your host, Charlene Buckles, a proud Filipina Kentuckian. My guest today is Melanie Parker. Melanie's parents were Filipino overseas workers in Benghazi, Libya, where she was born. In the mid-1980s, when the U.S. was bombing Libya, she and her family moved back to Manila, Philippines, until they immigrated to eastern Kentucky in 1991.
First of all, I did not realize all of your background in the healthcare world, which is so impressive. And I love that you're what you're doing, especially your background with serving Asian Americans in healthcare.
Yeah, I think, with a Filipino background, there's this, it's not a very inside joke. I think everybody in the world knows that you at least know one Filipino nurse in your family. So that's really how the path started out. If you're not a doctor, then you try to become a nurse. I didn't find the true passion in that, but, I found something along healthcare. So I think that made my parents pretty happy at the end.
And it's all about their happiness, of course, for Asian kids.
Well, yeah.
I like to start the beginning of every episode talking about the name of the show. And of course, that's a question that we as Asian Americans get 1 to 1,000,000 times in our lifetime. Where are you really from? So what are the emotions and reactions you get when you're asked that question? Where are you from?
I think now living in Kentucky for so long, now it's more like a chuckle, but it still garners an eye roll. Because, early on when I started to notice what it actually meant, it's just evolved into this polite way of asking origin, right? I don't know if you're familiar with Eastern Kentucky or Appalachia, but everybody is so nice. But, they don't want to outright come out and say it. So it's like, oh, where are y'all from? And before it was just a way for how to identify my family. Like, is your dad my doctor? Or, how can, they living in Whitesburg, Kentucky, they saw, this brown girl. It's like, we know she's not from here. How can we place her? I'm not offended, but it is more like, I find it amusing, but it's not okay. It's more like territorial screening if you really sit back and look at it. Are you familiar with The Walking Dead?
No, I'm not actually. So tell me what you mean by that.
Okay, so in that series, the main character screens others to who's trying to join his crew or group or whatever, and he always asks them these 3 questions. It's how many zombies have you killed? How many people you killed? Why? And it's this common theme throughout the seasons, right? And it's that kind of screening. I felt it's like, oh, where are y'all from? And it's like, I feel like they're trying to fit me in some kind of box. Like, people feel really comfortable with labels. And it's not the point that, I think they mean well, but it's like, it makes you feel better, but it makes me feel like I don't belong.
Right.
So just because I'm Filipino, or, my dad from the hospital, or you can place us wherever in the community, it doesn't make me any less Kentuckian. So, I think I've learned to take it in stride now, but before it was like, what are you getting to? So now I just play a little game. And my husband picks up on it now because it's something I've hipped him to, about how many questions it takes for them to re-ask it before they get the answer that they want. Where are you from? I grew up in Eastern Kentucky, and, it was before I lived in Lexington, and now it's like, oh, I live in Louisville now. Oh, well, where were you born here? It's like a rephrasing. Sometimes it takes up to 3. And then if I don't feel like being chatty, I'll say, oh, I'm from Libya. Well, I don't look Libyan, It's fun. It's really fun, but it messes with people.
It does. And it's always, and I'm still trying to learn the best way to approach it myself, because there's the reactions I get with people, it's like, it really depends on my mood of how much I want to like put effort into this, right? Because it is a
right. Like, how much do you want to talk? It's a pandemic. You're not necessarily small talking with people anymore the way you used to, right?
Exactly.
You want to make it quick and short, and I tend to mumble. So if I'm small talking with you with my mask on, sometimes I just don't have the patience to explain where I'm from.
Right. Exactly. So actually, and this is a big part of what I wanted to talk about, because our friends, our kids, and so both of our oldest sons are 3 years old. Melanie's oldest son is almost 3 years old. A friend of mine had posted that she was at the Louisville Zoo the other day when someone had asked her 3.5-year-old, "Where are you from?" And her little boy is half Asian, half Black. And this person who asked just couldn't place them, and he had just came up to the little boy without asking permission from his mom. And so I wanted to get your thoughts, because I have a lot of thoughts about it. But what are your thoughts about our sons experiencing racism and microaggression for the first time, which I guess is going to happen sooner rather than later? I mean, I thought that we would have at least a couple of years, but in this instance, at the zoo, it happened around our son's age.
And I think that I would almost have to say, was it another parent asking? Part of me is still like ever the optimist that like the children get it, like the kids are okay, the kids will get it, and the microaggression just permeate or trickle down from the behaviors from what they see from their parents. So it's like, who asked you that? Did someone's granny ask you, or did someone's mom? I mean, I had to think of that question. I really had to think of, I asked my mom one time, like, how she felt my experience was living in rural Kentucky and acclimating and being new, and what I did to fit in. And she was like, "Oh, you were fine. Like, you got this. And, kids are just kids." And I mean, I'm trying not to like adapt that mindset, because I think in hindsight it was difficult, but I did roll with it. And thinking of my son, who he's also half Black, half Filipino, I'm hyper aware that there's going to be some self-reflection, even at 3 years old, of how he looks, where he's from, why he's getting asked that, but maybe not his cousins, or maybe not his friends. So, like I said, ever the optimist, but still really hyper aware that there are differences, and people are willing to call that out.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I still go back and forth on about talking to my son about, because again, he's only 3, and I thought I had a few more years to even start talking about these questions that people might ask him. And I think you and I are very similar in the sense that we are just so proud of our heritage and so proud of who we are as Filipinos and like our background. And we want to make sure that we strengthen our kids with that knowledge of where they really are from. But then the question of how are they going to interact with the world with these questions is just a whole different piece that I'm not necessarily prepared yet.
Right, because it's when you're asked that, or when that question is posed to me, it's always, well, what context is it? What's the asterisk? And really, as a parent, and that whole like mama bear instinct is to try to protect them from the asterisk, or from the leaning context, right? He was born in Louisville. He's from Louisville. But people just want to know more. And again, just back to what I was saying, that general question has just evolved into the accepted polite way, but it's not a great question. It's intrusive. It's not okay. And normalizing that it's not okay because we have accepted it for so long, and calling it out. The other side will surely get offended, right? But if we learn to call it out, then over time, the hope is that people won't ask it that way anymore if you're not truly interested in where we're from, or if that's not what you're really asking.
Right. And I mean, at the end of the day, that question is, and we've talked about this in other episodes, the question is othering, right? Like, I mean, they're saying that you don't look white or black. So clearly you're something else entirely. And you're not from Kentucky because you don't look white or black. And so they're wanting to really figure you out and oversimplify you by trying to place you in a box, like you said, and try to check the mark. And so I think you're right. I think that people are kind of coming to terms with that. But then when I heard this story of my friend's son in Louisville or in the zoo, it kind of just took me aback because it made me really pause and think about my son's soon experiences.
Right, because I think you and I are well equipped to answer that question now, right? We've gone through it. We have the grit. We know the nuances of that question. But I immigrated here when I was 6. They're 3. So you're right. The fact that the conversation or the grooming that we have to do for them is sooner than we expected. It's a lot. It's a lot to consider amidst, potty training, making sure they wear their mask is, answering that question, right? Where are you from?
Right, exactly.
This is Where Y'all Really From, a podcast from LPM, Louisville Public Media. Welcome back to Where Y'all Really From.
So Melanie, we were talking about how to teach our sons how to confront racism and microaggressions, even at the early age of 3.5, because we've had friends whose sons have experienced that at this young an age. I was actually in a race-based trauma group with Dr. Stephen Nifley, and he was talking about teaching our children racial literacy versus racial legacy. So racial literacy is trying to examine a situation and really trying to figure out, are they being really racist? Are they being malintended? How do I react to this situation in a way that's authentic to myself? Because some people are not ready necessarily to confront it. Some people are not ready to educate, but you also don't want to necessarily be so upset that you're flipping tables, right? You want to show them that you're upset, but in a healthy way. So that's the concept of racial literacy versus racial legacy, which is what our parents have essentially taught us, that like, it's okay, you're fine, you're going to be fine. This happens to us, and just take it in stride, like how our parents kind of taught us, that generation. What do you think about these two concepts in the sense that, what do you think about these two concepts when you're wanting to teach your son about race?
I mean, it's interesting, the whole concept of racial literacy anyway, because I just can't believe that it's a thing that has to be conditioned, it's learned, because racial legacy is so inherent, or at least, like my Filipino mom just like pounds it to you, right? It seems that like racial literacy belongs in annual retrainings and new employee hires at corporations that are trying to boost their, diversity and inclusion groups, and making sure they check off some kind of box that everybody's not going to mess up at work and you're not going to cross that line. But when you apply it to parenting and your young children, I think it is important lessons to instill in them now. But then it makes me pause and say, well, in the 80s and 90s, what was available to me in racial literacy or was that all just like was it all just handed down word of mouth, cautionary tales by my mom, or you know, and like cautionary tales and like in rules that I thought that were so ridiculous that, I didn't see a rationale of why I couldn't go to this person's house or why I wasn't allowed to say certain things or, it's something that I didn't understand, but now it's like, oh, she was trying to protect me from this, or this is how she built resilience, or this is how she toughened up my skin in this situation if I ever came across it, because she totally did.
I mean, I feel like it's something that we are navigating, especially as first generation immigrants, and now as moms. At least for me, I had never even thought about the difference between racial literacy and racial legacy until I had kids, until I thought about what I want to teach them when they come into these situations that are going to be, of course, these situations that are inevitable, especially in a place like Kentucky where they are such a minority. And so I honestly haven't thought about it so deeply where I'm like trying to think about my experience, because I have very similar experiences with my family and my mom, and they just tell you that's just the way of the world, suck it up, and just move on. But you're right. Like I want to teach my son like that, to be able to process those things and not hold it in and bottle it up. Because even as a 35-year-old, I don't know how to articulate my emotions at that time or my reaction to that time. I've been taught to just smile and move on.
And I think it's also the racial literacy part is you have to be better, regardless of what comes at you. And, in the way that you described the literacy portion earlier, it's like, how do you react? Like how do you condition yourself to have that gut reaction? But it's almost like fight or flight. But over the years, I mean, you just have to be better, regardless of how you do that, right? Like nobody ever told you how to handle yourself better, how to be better. And it's not like being Asian or being a minority. Nobody ever says you're one step back already, but you know it because that's how we act accordingly, is we just have to be better. So, I mean, even in preparing for parenthood, I knew that in the way that my mom like pushed me so much, that I would also have to advocate for my own children. I just think like advocacy for your children was definitely something that I had to do because of the whole have to be better aspect, or have to be better notion, for the legacy part.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what do you think will be our kids' biggest challenge as they navigate their racial identities?
I think there's many facets to the challenges that they'll face. One glaring thing is, will they ever be Asian enough? First of all, they're American born. And there's always that distinction of, do you know enough Tagalog? Or it's a tongue-in-cheek joke, but it's like, can we sell you when we go back home? Like, will you understand enough Tagalog for you to defend yourself or something like that? So there's always that, inferiority aspect about adequacy within your own community, right? But then also when you think about the greater whole, the bigger challenges, the labels that is put on. So it already asks them up front, like, what are you? Are you Black? Are you Asian? What bubble are you circling? And then all the things that come with that because of how you identify. So is that label enough for him to feel that he is truly Asian? And I think that's definitely what I think he'll grapple with, because I felt it too. And like I came to America. I knew where I came from. But he was born here, but it doesn't make him any less Asian. So definitely a challenge I see up ahead.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Actually, as my son, well, actually for myself, it was I don't know Tagalog very fluently. I mean, I can understand it fluently, but my mom came from a generation that were actually like a family that said you need to teach your children English so that they could be they would have an easier life. And so I could fully understand it, and I could fully like watch the movies and watch the news, and I could even like stumble reading through it. But for whatever reason, I can't speak it fluently. Like I can't switch it on as quickly as I would like.
They call that baluktot ng dila. It's like your tongue is crooked. You
backwards,
can't phrase it, or you can't speak it so fast. They know. Right.
No, they know. And so, it's hard for me to kind of go to a Filipino store or to go to my cousins in the Philippines because they know that I can't speak Tagalog fluently. So now I'm trying to get Tagalog classes and books for me and my son and my kids so that they can sort of get through it like you're saying. But at the end of the day, when we go visit my family in the Philippines or even my family in California, they see us as a different breed. They will always see us as Filipino Kentuckian. Like it's not two separate entities. Like because I grew up
Americano.
Yeah, an Americano or a Philam, because we're never gonna be that like fully Filipino. But for me, that was enough. I don't know if it's gonna be enough for my son or my kids, and I don't ever want them to lose that.
As an emergence, just in the last year, mainstream emergence anyway, of Asian American pride, I do think that there are a lot of people our age who have come out and said, this is what I'm grappling with, or these are my feelings about it as far as, are they Filipino enough? Are they Asian enough? And so I think putting that out there actually comforts me in that I wasn't alone, or I'm not alone. But like I mentioned earlier, I'm ever the optimist in if we're doing the work now, perhaps it won't be as bad for my sons. But we have to continue the hyper awareness, right? We have to continue to do the work. The fact that we have to ensure that we have to buy the books or, take the classes. We just have to do the work. Along with the books that you mentioned, there's a series of books by author illustrator Todd Snow, and it just shows a different array of kids, but the whole book or the whole series is just affirmations. You are beautiful, you are helpful, you are creative. And that kind of, first of all, I picked these books because they're beautifully illustrated. And I think when I looked at the books, it's like, oh, this is what my son's daycare looks like. And I want him to see that he can look at this page and, it's not, this is a Black boy or this is definitely an Asian boy. It's like, it was illustrated ambiguously enough that he could see himself in these books. And that was really important to me, because when it comes back down to the whole root of our conversation about labels making everybody else feel better but yourself, if he could identify with himself in that book without it being like outwardly like, this is you because it's the only brown boy on this page, reading these books have kind of provided us this, like our own affirmations that are catered to us. So his is, I believe in myself. I have confidence. I'm loved. I am smart. I am somebody. I'm awesome. I am incredible. I am important and I am beautiful.
Oh, I love that.
And it's long because we've added one a week or whenever we remember to. It started out with one or two, and then it just keeps getting longer. And even though he may be 3, and surely enough regurgitating just to please, if you say it enough, you believe it.
I love that.
And that's just how a racial legacy is, right? If you say it enough, you believe it, you learn it, and soon it becomes racial literacy instead of racial legacy.
Right. I love that. I'd like to end the show every episode with lightning round questions. Are you ready?
Bring it on.
Okay. What's your superpower?
I would have to say it was a weakness at first, but now I feel like I can harness it. But observation. Coming to America, it's like, well, let me see what everybody else is doing first. I'll either just do it just like them or maybe better. But then it meant that I was always like second or last, like I was never the first to do it. And I think just over time, the gift or skill of observation just helped me be more like hyper aware of my surroundings or even my interactions with people. Because then I feel like I can think quick and act quick. So observations in my back pocket.
Love that. Favorite song to jam to?
I really had to think, and I even scrolled through my Spotify playlist to see what was like most played other than Baby Shark in 2020, 2021. But nothing gets me going like Love on Top by Beyonce. It's really fast paced. It becomes an earworm. I slow it down for a lullaby for my son. It applies to all.
Love it. Favorite comfort food?
It has to be, it's definitely something with rice.
So many people have told us that.
It's definitely something with rice, but nothing is more comforting than like fried Spam and steamed rice. First of all, it was the first thing that like my mom taught me how to cook. Because it's like you open the can, you fry it, and then there's rice already made because there's always rice around. And that was like after school snack.
But did you have an egg with it as well?
It depends on the time of day, but
I don't think I've ever had Spam without eggs.
But yeah, that's Spam silog, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then lastly, what's the most Kentucky thing you do?
So I grew up in Whitesburg, Kentucky, like foothills of Appalachia. And pridefully, I take a piece of cornbread, crumble up in my soup beans, and I know just the right amount of raw onion to put on top with my soup beans. So I'm not sweating it out the rest of the day.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you sharing your insights and also just being you and being an awesome mom.
Thanks so much.
Where Y'all Really From is created by Dan Wu, Charlene Buckles, Nima Kulkarni, and May Suramek, and hosted by Dan and Charlene. Our show is edited by Alex Cooper, and our music is by Kojin Toshiro. Leanne Gann did our graphic design. Where Y'all Really From is part of the Louisville Public Media Podcast Incubator with support from the Community Foundation of Louisville, Podchaser, Rankings.io, and the Eye Care Institute's Bridgertown Clinical Trials. Our executive producer is Laura Ellis. For more information and to keep in touch, visit whereyallreallyfrom.org.